I wonder what you think about this concept. I've said this before, that there's actually 3 genders: high status men, low status men, and women. And those low status men
that's harsh.
low status men are chasing the women. Those
Sure.
women are chasing high status men. And so a lot of times, the reason why I say the 3 genders is because when you consider, and I would say probably 55 or 15-85, meaning the top 15, 10% of men, and then the bottom 80 to 85% of men. The reason why I bring that up is because there's a book, The Winner Effect, that goes over like men who are successful. There's basically different neurology for these men. Their belief, there's abundance mentality versus a scarcity mentality, the number of sexual partners that they have over a lifetime, the amount of income that they get, and their overall life satisfaction is so completely different from these other men. And then when we get into this discussion, who cheats more, men or women? My answer is the bottom, like low status men cheat less, or can't cheat at all. High status men will cheat more, and then women will cheat however much that they cheat. And whenever we answer these questions, when we say men and women, when we say all men, we're just not including all men are. That's a bad way to look at it, because high status men are so completely different from low status men. When we talk to women, though, we do kind of see some similarities in what, like the way their hypergamy works. And so I don't feel like high status women and low status women think that differently. They all seem to find Jason Momoa and Chris Hemsworth attractive. But whereas high status men and low status men, when you were talking about before, a man willing to wait before he gives commitment, wait a long time to give up sex or to have sex. I was like, low status men will wait a long time to have sex. High status men is a wash and optionality. And so that's why I try to make that differentiation, because if you don't, then it's just all men cheat. All men are bad. All men are dogs.
I like that. I will push back on one point, which is that if you phrase it like that, I'm afraid that some men might hear, well, I'm not currently a high value man.
Yeah.
Michael says that I'm just a different gender, like I'm a different species.
Yeah.
I'm in this camp and there's nothing I can do about it.
Well, there's something you can do about it.
There's absolutely things you can do about it. That's what I'm pushing back
Yeah.
against, which is that, you know, I work with some guys, or I get the comments on the channel. It's like, you know, I'm 5'6", or I don't have a lot of money. And it's like, yeah, but a lot of these things, not your height apparently, but a lot of these things can change.
Yeah.
I mean, before I moved to San Francisco, I was living in public housing in Brooklyn. You know, I was broke, and now I'm definitely in the top 1% of earners. You know what I'm saying? When I started the YouTube channel 3.5 years ago, for the first year and a half, it would get 3-4 views per episode. Now it's getting millions. So it's like, as a guy, you can actually move the needle in significant ways. When you talk about the top 10 or 20% of men, it's not like you're just born into that and you live there until you die.
Yes.
Like it's malleable.
It's a rite of passage you can go into
socioeconomics
and come back out of.
In America, it's actually fairly mobile. America is one of the most socioeconomically mobile cultures that have ever existed on the planet. And it can take a long time for men to get into that top 10 or 20%. Like I talk about in the book, that's ascending to your captaincy. And that can take 10 years of hard work with no guarantee of success.
Right.
It might take less time.
Right.
There's a great book on this. David Buss and Cindy Meston, both at UT Austin, wrote a book called Why Women Have Sex. They go over 237 reasons why women have sex.
Moly.
And then at the beginning of the book, Dr. Buss jokes, he goes, if we wrote a book called Why Men Have Sex, it would be a pamphlet.
No doubt.
Yes, it'd be much shorter. So what you said before, my girlfriend, she's mentioned this before. She says, she saw a picture of me at 21. I got to read that
book. That sounds awesome.
Yeah, it's a great book. Now, only chapter 1 is about attractiveness. Chapter 8 is literally about extortion. Like it goes over every possible reason why men and women would have sex. But the variety, the negative kurtosis statistically of reasons why women choose men is so vast, as opposed to if I were to say, was Margot Robbie attractive in Wolf of Wall Street, and ask 100 men, all 100 hands go up.
Sure.
It was Selma Hayek attractive in Dusk Till Dawn? All 100 hands go up. But for women, they're like, is Jason Momoa attractive? You actually have women be like, he's too big or he's too hairy.
Sure, yeah.
They'll say things like this. And so it's really interesting. But yeah, that book absolutely changed. And then the other issue was, my girlfriend, one time she saw a picture of me at 21. He laughs at this every time. She goes, I would have dated you. My girlfriend is this gorgeous, she's like a world champion bikini model or whatever. And I'm like, you wouldn't have pissed on me if I was on fire when I was 21. But in her mind, my 46-year-old attractiveness was baked into the 21-year-old. She doesn't understand the difference of like 40 pounds of muscle, like income, education, 7 years in the US military. Like she doesn't see any of that. In her mind, it's just like, it's a fairy dust. It was sprinkled in and it was always there. And
well,
so
she'll always see you through the lens of her attraction.
Correct.
This is why it's the most important thing to keep a woman, to make her attraction exists at a consistently high level.
Yes.
That is by far the most important thing, because the issue is the same behavior will be perceived positively or negatively as a consequence of her level of attraction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If she really likes you, she's going to think, oh, he's so confident.
Yeah.
You know, and if for whatever reason she's not feeling you so much, she's
You're
like,
cocky.
you're so arrogant. Like, I can't stand this guy. He's so full of himself. He thinks he could do anything. It's the exact same fucking behavior, but it's being perceived through the lens of attraction differentially. And that's paradoxically why so many of the things that tend to attract us in the beginning of a relationship are the same things that piss us the hell off some years down the road when the fairy dust has trickled off.
Maybe the woman who is dating a guy who a lot of other women find attractive, and then they've been together for a while, and now she's annoyed by the fact that she gets all that.
Absolutely.
And the contrary would be the guy who picks up the girl from the strip club, and then later on it's like, I don't want you stripping anymore, right? It's the thing that he found attractive initially and alluring becomes annoying later. What you're saying?
Yeah, no, to segue into that, in one of your videos, you talked about, I believe it was called either attraction or status proxies as opposed to the actual triggers.
Yeah.
And something you said was that when you were younger and you were a broke actor, you actually almost did better with women than when you were a successful psychologist. So
for a while, yeah, until I got famous.
Right.
And that changed things.
Or you had status, right? So why do you think?
Well, I had status. I don't mean like as a doctor, you're a pretty high status role, and I
more
already was making a
recognition,
lot.
like
Fame is different from status.
Yes.
Right.
Let's go into that. So I asked. Well, go ahead.
So my question was, where do you think guys go wrong? Because some guys think they need like some of these certain proxies, but it never actually ends up giving them that attraction or desire with women. That's what you see with your clients a lot of times, it seems.
Yeah, and I think the most common attraction proxy in men's imagination is money, and they think that if I just had $1 million, I would also be awash in optionality.
Yeah.
But there are plenty of millionaires in San Francisco who are sitting alone drinking in meat market bars on Polk Street because they never learned to approach a woman. If a woman did sit down next to him, he wouldn't know how to riz her up. He wouldn't know how to engage her emotions. He wouldn't know how to play the game of seduction and to maintain her interest at a very high level. And the fact of the matter is, your statistic notwithstanding, is that there is a man tonight who is unemployed, is living in his parents' basement, and is going to get fucked tonight.
Yeah.
There are people in prison who are, women are traveling long distances for conjugal visits. You know what I'm saying? It's like this, whatever excuse you're giving yourself, it's like the men don't want to do the one thing that would directly improve their chances of getting women, which is increasing their communication and seductive skills.
Let me ask you, do you think that there is any kind of push? I mean, you read the American Psychological Association considers traditional masculinity to be harmful. But one thing I've said is that top 15% of men, while it's never been easier to get in that top 15% because you're being told not to be there. Sure. Because Hank Moody is a scoundrel, because Harvey Specter is a scoundrel. Like, they don't want you to be that type of man. And so if you don't listen to that and you actually do the things like do the work, build a scalable business, become more charismatic, build up your riz, get a wider shoulder to waist ratio. I don't know if you've seen the study. Women have more orgasms with men with wider 1.65 to 1 shoulder to waist ratio.
Sure, yeah.
Exactly. You do all those things that are considered to be traditionally masculine that other people. Stoicism is one of the best examples. Stoicism is mistaken. For men, we see stoicism. I see a guy who's helping me solve problems. We work together. I don't need to look at his facial expressions to understand we're on the same team. Whereas a woman will see a man who's stoic as being like emotionally stunted. And I'm like, that's not, the fireman who saves your children is not emotionally stunted. He's just he doesn't need to have that expression right now. I was wondering, do you feel, because I know Myron asked you something about this, about the feminization of psychology, 5% of psychologists under the age of 30 are men, some number like that. There, in that instance, do you feel like, this is just my opinion, it's never been easier to get in that top 15%, but you're being taught to not be in it?
Sure. I think I was thinking of making an episode on this subject, that and both things are true. It's never been easier in the history of humanity to be very masculine. And it's also apparently never been harder. By the same token, it's never been easier to be feminine, but it's also never been harder. Think about it. How hard do you think it must have been to be feminine in the Wild West?
Exactly.
When there were no showers or indoor plumbing, and you had to keep all your clothes clean by hand, and cosmetics needed to be shipped, on a train for 2 months. It's like, and yet the women had their bustles and their coiffures, and they did what's best they could to keep up that femininity in really inhospitable environments.
Yeah.
Think of how easy it might be to perform femininity in today's culture, given the accessibility of all the accoutrement and the convenience, and yet so few women do it.
Yeah.
At least in our major cities.
I like to say, we get further and away from a survival scenario.
Yeah.
You start to see, like, for instance, gender roles did not exist because men were misogynistic. Gender roles existed for survivability because one of the two genders was on average 15% bigger with thicker bones, muscles, and more testosterone to do the hunting and to do the and protect against predation and to build shelter. Like, that's the reason why that happened. That there were more defined gender roles in part because of survivability. Whereas the further we get away from this is a good thing. Steven Pinker writes a book called Enlightenment Now, where he goes over why the world is actually better than at this point, at any point in history.
Sure.
The poorest people in the world can get antibiotics, whereas the richest man in the world in the 17th century would have been like Henry VIII, and he died of gout, right? Or the 15th century, he died of gout. Like something that would be easily curable today. I'd still rather be here today and poor than living in the 15th century and wealthy, right? So that kind of stuff. But when we go over that, the further we get away from a survival scenario, the more we can allow these mismatches, these evolutionary mismatches to happen, like feminized men or masculinized women. And then the other thing is, like I said before, the idea of like men's coming to passage, men teasing other men a lot of times is considered bullying. They're roughhousing is actually play. These things are being discouraged. And I think with the American, I was listening to Jordan Peterson talk about the APA thing, and he called it scandalous. And he was like, what's happened is these men providing masculine boundaries to their children. They're thinking that these things are all completely taught, but they always miss the part about men having 17 times as much testosterone as women, and testosterone regulating aggression, assertion, ambition, and libido. And they just sort of throw that out and just say, no, the only reason men are more aggressive is because they've been taught by other men to be more aggressive.
Yeah. Lot there. Okay. So I talk about the gender roles related to survivability in one of my episodes. I think it's like, when you're living close to a subsistence level in a hunter-gatherer society, you need to send your best hunters out for food.
Yes.
Right.
The decision to send suboptimal hunters when better hunters are available would be terrible for that community. But the more that there is an abundance of food or storehouses of that, and the more that we're elevated above necessity, well, why not give some of the B string a chance? It's like when a team is winning by 40 points, that's when the third players get some court time. And it's like, why not? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The issue is that it does lead to suboptimal outcomes, right? The third string players are third string for a reason, and they're not going to be scoring as many points. That might not be a problem in a game that is time bounded and is already in the bag. But in terms of, let's say, international competition and maintaining high standards of living in an increasingly global society, I think that when we act as if the game is already won and there's a time boundary, we might fall further and further behind relative to some of our international competition.
Are you sick of doing pickup to meet women? Click the link below and I'll send you my high status networking playbook for free so you can start dating high quality women today.